That evening, I sat in the kind of chair that tells you exactly where you stand. Not the round tables with the white linen and the centerpieces that cost more than my first car. Not the long head table where my daughter-in-law Brianna stood laughing with her colleagues, champagne in hand, shoulders back, every inch of her radiating the particular confidence of a woman who believes she has arrived. No, I sat near the kitchen door. The chair was fine padded even, but it was positioned just close enough to the service entrance that waitstaff brushed past me every few minutes, carrying trays of shrimp cocktail and smoked salmon crostini out to the people who mattered. Brianna looked past me 3 times that evening. Not through me past me, the way you look past a potted plant or a coat rack. I was simply part of the room's furniture, unremarkable, expected, easily forgotten. And when she walked up to that stage in her midnight blue dress to accept the award for Top Producer of the Year, the room erupting in applause, 200 people on their feet, I clapped along with everyone else. I want you to hold on to that image for a moment. Me in the corner near the kitchen door, clapping for the woman who had seated me there. Now I want you to hold on to this one. The building they were all standing in, the gleaming 42-story tower in the heart of Midtown Atlanta. The address printed on every Whitfield Realty business card, the location of that very gala, the place where Brianna had spent 5 years building her career and her reputation and her sense of who she was. I own it. Every square foot, every lease, every elevator and conference room and floor-to-ceiling window with a view of the city. I have owned it since 2008. But to understand why I sat in that corner chair without saying a single word, why I clapped, why I smiled at the waitstaff, why I tucked my small black notebook back into my purse, and simply watched, you need to understand how the story really began. Not that night, not even close to that night. It began 5 years ago on a Sunday afternoon in October when my son Derek pulled into my driveway and stepped out of his car with a woman I had never met. My house on Elmwood Drive is not impressive by anyone's current standards, and I know it. It's a 3-bedroom craftsman bungalow in a neighborhood that Atlanta's glossy real estate magazines would describe as up and coming, which is their polite way of saying it hasn't been discovered yet by the people with money. The porch sags slightly on the left side. The kitchen floor has a tile that's been loose since 2014, and I keep meaning to fix it. The backyard has a fig tree that Leonard planted in 1991 and a vegetable garden that I've kept going every summer since he passed. It is the house where I raised my son. It is the house where I made every significant decision of my adult life. It is in every way that matters to me exactly enough. Brianna did not think so. I knew it the moment she stepped out of the passenger side of Derek's Audi and looked at the front of the house. She didn't say anything, she was too smart for that, at least in those early days, but there was a half-second pause in her movement. A recalibration. The kind that happens when something is less than you expected and you're deciding how to rearrange your face before the other person notices. She was beautiful, I'll give her that. Sharp cheekbones, honey blonde hair that she wore straight, the posture of someone who had been told her whole life that she was exceptional. Derek looked at her the way he used to look at things he loved as a boy, with a kind of helpless devotion, like he couldn't quite believe his luck. I was in the kitchen making soup when I heard them on the front walk. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. I just have good ears, and the kitchen window was cracked open because I'd burned the toast that morning and the smell was still lingering. "It's cozy," Derek said. I could hear the slight defensiveness in his voice. He always got that way when he was preparing me for someone's reaction, or preparing someone for me. A brief pause, then, "Is she doing okay financially, I mean?" The question landed so lightly, so casually, like it was a natural thing to wonder about out loud on someone's front walk before you'd even knocked on their door. I set down my spoon. I did not move from the stove. I listened to Derek say something quiet and reassuring that I couldn't quite make out. And then I heard my front door open. He still had his key, and I picked my spoon back up and kept stirring. When I came out of the kitchen to greet them, I was smiling. I have been smiling at things like that for a very long time. In the 5 years that followed, I watched Brianna construct her understanding of me with the same careful attention she gave to everything else in her life. She saw what she was meant to see. An older woman, 64, silver hair she hadn't bothered to color in years, reading glasses perpetually perched on her head, or misplaced entirely. A woman who wore the same rotation of comfortable clothes she'd owned since the 90s because they still fit, and she didn't see the point in replacing what wasn't broken. A woman who brought handmade gifts to every occasion, quilted potholders for Christmas, hand-knitted blankets for birthdays, jars of fig preserves from the backyard tree. I saw the potholders go into a drawer without being opened. I saw the blanket end up in a donation bag 18 months later. I did not say anything about either. She called me Mom in front of Derek and called me nothing when he wasn't around because there was no need to call me anything. I wasn't really part of the conversation. When I phoned to ask about Noah, she had a way of answering with one hand and doing something else with the other. Her attention spread so thin you could see through it. "He's fine, Hannah. He's right here. Noah, wave at your grandma." "Okay," he waved. "He's going down for a nap now. I'll have Derek call you." She wasn't cruel about it. That would have required more energy than she was willing to spend on me. I was simply not important enough to be cruel to. I understood. I had met women like Brianna before, capable, driven, deeply convinced that the world's resources were finite and that every person around them was either an asset or a liability. I was in her calculation a liability. A woman of no financial consequence, no social utility, no professional relevance. Someone to be managed politely and kept at a comfortable distance. What I did not correct was her arithmetic. But here's the thing about people who only see what they expect to see. Sometimes they show you something true anyway. It was a Wednesday afternoon about a year into the marriage. I had stopped by unannounced, something I almost never did because I respected the boundary, even if the boundary had never been spoken out loud. But Noah had left a stuffed elephant at my house during his last visit, and he was inconsolable about it on the phone, and I lived close enough to drop it off on my way back from the grocery store. Derek's car wasn't in the driveway. I rang the bell, waited, rang again. I was about to leave the elephant on the porch when I heard Noah's voice inside, and then Brianna's, and I could tell through the front door that she hadn't heard the bell. I let myself in with the spare key Derek had given me, another thing Brianna didn't know about, and followed the voices to the living room. They were on the floor together. Brianna had changed out of whatever she'd been wearing for work and was in sweatpants and a worn-out college t-shirt, her hair pulled back in a messy knot. Noah was in her lap with a puzzle spread out on the coffee table in front of them, and she was holding a piece up to the light and squinting at it in this exaggerated theatrical way that was clearly for his benefit, and he was laughing that deep belly laugh that 6-year-olds have, the kind that takes over their whole body. She didn't know anyone was watching, and for a moment, just a moment, I saw her. Not the polished agent with the perfect posture and the careful smile. Something quieter than that. She kissed the top of Noah's head without thinking about it, the way you do something you've done 1,000 times, and he leaned back into her like he was entirely at home there. I stood in the doorway for longer than I needed to. Then I set the elephant on the hall table quietly and left. I thought about it on the drive home. I sat with it. She loved her son. She loved her husband in the way she was capable of loving him, which was real even if it was also complicated and conditional, and shot through with calculation in ways that love probably shouldn't be. That was true, and it mattered, and I did not want to forget it. I opened the small black notebook I kept in my purse, the one I'd carried every day for 20 years, the one that had held more important information than most people's filing cabinets. And I wrote one line. She is not entirely what she appears to be either. I wrote it because I was fair. I wrote it because I had spent 40 years making decisions on evidence, not emotion, and because one person can contain contradictions, and because the question of what to do about Brianna Carter was not a simple one, and I was not going to treat it as if it were. I closed the notebook, put it back in my purse, and then I drove home to make dinner. The conversation about the house happened on a Saturday in March, 3 months before the gala. Derek and Brianna came over for lunch. They did this occasionally, usually when Brianna wanted something and had decided that a home-cooked meal was the right environment in which to ask for it. I had learned to read the signs, the way she'd be slightly warmer than usual when they arrived, the way the conversation would circle around to the real topic like water going down a drain. Over chicken and rice, with Noah occupied in the living room with his toys and the television turned low, Brianna brought it up. She'd been thinking, she said, about my living situation, about how it didn't make sense for me to be rattling around in this big house all by myself. She called it big, which told me she hadn't actually looked at it because it was under 1,400 square feet when they had plenty of room, and Noah would love having me closer. She said it so warmly. She really did. Derek nodded along, and I could see from the particular quality of his nodding that this was not the first time he'd heard this proposal. They'd rehearsed it, or at least she had rehearsed it, and he had been present for the rehearsal and had agreed that this was the right approach. I listened to all of it. I asked a few gentle questions. I said the thing I always said in these situations. Let me think about it. Brianna smiled, reached over and patted my hand. Of course. Take all the time you need. What she said to Derek when they were in the kitchen together, and she thought I'd gone to check on Noah, was different. She doesn't really understand what we're suggesting. We might just need to handle this one for her. I was standing in the hallway. I had not gone to check on Noah. I heard every word. I went back to the living room and sat down on the floor next to my grandson, who immediately climbed into my lap without being asked and handed me a toy car. Vroom, he said seriously by way of explanation. Vroom, I agreed, and while he made the car travel across my knee and up my arm and zoom off the edge of my shoulder, I reached into my purse with my free hand and opened the small black notebook. I wrote down the date. I wrote down what I'd heard. Brianna glanced into the living room on her way back from the kitchen and saw me with the notebook. She paused for half a second. "What are you writing?" she asked, lightly, curiously. I looked up and smiled. "Grocery list," I said. "I keep forgetting things." She laughed a real laugh, almost fond. "I do that too," she said and moved on. I watched her go. Then I turned back to the notebook, added one more line at the bottom of the page, and closed it. Let me tell you who I actually am. Not who Brianna thought I was. Not who the neighbors assumed I was when they saw me walking to the corner store with my canvas bags on Tuesday mornings. Not the version of me that existed in Derek's careful, loving explanations to his wife. She's had a hard life, she's set in her ways. She just doesn't understand how things work now. I am Hannah Josephine Carter. I was born in Birmingham, Alabama in 1961 in a house that had 3 rooms and a roof that leaked when it rained, which in Alabama is most of the year. My mother cleaned other people's homes. My father worked at the steel plant until it shut down, and then he worked wherever he could find work, which was sometimes not very far and sometimes not at all. We were not romantically poor the way people describe poverty when they're looking back on it from somewhere comfortable. We were just poor. Tight shoes, thin coats, the specific arithmetic of a household where every dollar is already assigned before it arrives. I left Birmingham at 18 with a full academic scholarship to Spelman College in Atlanta and $73 in my pocket, which was everything I had. I studied accounting because I understood early that the people who controlled the numbers controlled everything else, and I intended to control something. I met Leonard Carter in my junior year. He was studying civil engineering at Morehouse, and he had the kind of steadiness about him that I had never encountered before in a person not calm exactly, but solid, like a load-bearing wall. He laughed easily and argued carefully, and never once in 31 years of marriage made me feel like I was too much or not enough. I have not met anyone like him since, and I have stopped expecting to. We married in 1984. We saved. We lived carefully and deliberately and without apology for either. And in the fall of 1987, Leonard spread a road map of the Atlanta metro area across our kitchen table, the same kitchen table that is still in my house on Elmwood Drive, and pointed to a piece of land in a suburb that nobody was paying attention to yet. "This," he said. The lot cost $18,500. We had $6,500 in savings. Leonard's mother lent us $2,000. We borrowed the rest from a bank that made us come back 3 times before they agreed to the loan, and I understood exactly why they made us come back 3 times, and I filed that understanding away in the place where I kept things that were useful to remember. The night we signed the loan papers, I sat at that kitchen table after Derek was asleep. He was 3 years old, small enough to still fit in the crook of Leonard's arm, and my hands were shaking. Not from fear exactly, from the weight of it, from the understanding that we had just committed ourselves to something that could go very wrong and would take years to know if it had gone right. Leonard sat across from me and watched me for a moment. Then he put both his hands over mine flat until the shaking stopped. "Hannah," he said, "people are going to look at us and see what they want to see. But we know what we're building. That's the only thing that matters." I have thought about that sentence nearly every day since. We sold that first lot in 1990 for $34,000. We bought 2 more. We sold those and bought 4. Leonard kept his engineering job during the week and spent his weekends learning everything there was to know about commercial property development. I kept the books with a precision that our accountant, a man named Gerald, who wore the same brown cardigan to every meeting, once described as almost unsettling. Gerald meant it as a compliment. I took it as one. By 1995, we had accumulated enough capital and enough knowledge to do something real. That was the year I met Cecile Monroe at a real estate investment conference in New Orleans. She was presenting a paper on commercial lease structures in secondary markets, and I was in the 3rd row taking notes in my black notebook, and afterward I introduced myself, and we went to dinner and talked for 4 hours and have been talking ever since. Cecile is Creole from a family in Louisiana that had been quietly accumulating property for 3 generations without anyone outside the family knowing the full extent of it. She understood immediately what Leonard and I were trying to do, and why we were doing it quietly, and she became our first outside partner. She is still my partner today. She is also, in the truest sense of the word, my friend, the kind you can call at 2 in the morning when something has gone wrong, and she will already be awake, and she will already know what you need before you finish the sentence. In 2001, we incorporated Carter Equity Group. By then, we owned 7 commercial properties across Atlanta and Savannah and Charlotte. Leonard handled the construction and renovation side. I handled the financing and the leasing and the long-term strategy. We were not flashy about it. We lived in the same house we had always lived in. We drove reasonable cars. We sent Derek to good schools and told him that money was a tool, not an identity, and that the people worth knowing were the ones who behaved the same way, whether they thought anyone important was watching or not. Leonard died in March of 2009. He was 53 years old. A stroke sudden total, no warning that I would have known how to read, even if it had been there. He was here on a Wednesday and gone by Thursday morning, and I sat in a hospital chair in a hallway that smelled of disinfectant and old coffee, and understood for the first time in my adult life that the load-bearing wall was gone. I took 4 weeks off. I went back to work because the work was also Leonard's, and stopping felt like a second kind of loss I couldn't afford. Carter Equity today holds 23 commercial properties across 5 cities in the South. The portfolio is valued at approximately $340 million. I am the founder and chairman of the board. I have a small, excellent staff who know what they are doing and are paid well for it, and I trust them completely, which is something I do not say lightly. I still live on Elmwood Drive. I still use the same kitchen table. There is a reason I have never announced any of this. It is not modesty, and it is not shame, and it is not some carefully constructed persona designed to manipulate people, though I understand why it might look that way from the outside. The reason is simpler and older than any of that. In 2003, my cousin Raymond Jr., not Raymond Okafor, a different Raymond, one I had known since childhood, found out about Carter Equity. I don't know exactly how. Someone talked. These things always come from someone talking. Within 3 months, Raymond Jr. had consulted a lawyer and filed a claim asserting that certain early investments had been made with funds that were partly derived from family assets that should have been distributed differently after my aunt's death. The claim had no legal merit. Raymond Okafor, my lawyer, the Nigerian-American man with the calm voice and the terrifying intelligence who had been handling Carter Equity's legal affairs since 1998, dispatched it in 90 days without breaking a sweat. But the experience taught me something I have never forgotten. People behave differently when they know what you have. Sometimes better, often worse. Almost always differently, and differently in ways that make it very hard to know what you're actually seeing when you look at them. Wealth distorts. It creates a kind of static that makes everything harder to read clearly. I had spent my whole career learning to read things clearly. I was not willing to give that up. So I kept living the way I had always lived. I kept my house and my canvas bags and my comfortable old clothes. I kept driving a used Camry. I let people make their assumptions because people's assumptions, when they are wrong, are some of the most useful information available. The people who know the truth about me can be counted on both hands with fingers left over. Dorothy Washington Dot has been my executive assistant for 20 years. She is 58 years old, sharp as a tack, and has an instinct for people that I have come to trust almost as much as my own. She manages the day-to-day operations of Carter Equity with a precision that would make Gerald the Cardigan accountant weep with admiration. Raymond Okafor has been my lawyer since 1998 and knows every significant decision I have ever made professionally and otherwise. He is 55 years old and has the kind of face that gives nothing away in a room which is exactly what you want from a lawyer. Cecile Monroe. Jimmy Patterson, who has run security at the Carter Equity headquarters building since the day we opened it, and who was the first person I told when Leonard died, because he was standing right there, and it seemed wrong to walk past him without saying something true. And that is the list. Derek does not know. I made that decision when he was young and revisited it every few years, and every time I revisited it, the answer came back the same. He is my son, and I love him without reservation, but Derek has a generous heart and a leaky confidence, which is a combination that makes keeping secrets nearly impossible. He would tell someone eventually. With the best intentions, he would tell someone. I was at my desk on a Tuesday evening in February, 7 weeks before the gala, when Dot's monthly report came in. I read through it the way I always did, property by property, line by line, nothing skipped. The Peachtree Street building, the properties in Savannah, the Charlotte portfolio, the Midtown Tower, 38 tenants across 42 floors occupancy at 91%, 2 leases coming up for renewal in the spring. One of those leases was Whitfield Realty, floors 14 and 15, 12,000 square feet. They had been tenants for 5 years, which meant they had signed their original lease before Derek brought Brianna home to my kitchen in October. I had known Brianna worked at Whitfield Realty before I met her. Dot had flagged it as a routine matter when the background checks on renewal candidates came through. Nothing unusual, just the agent handling this account is a B. Whitfield currently senior associate, be aware in case it creates any conflict of interest with the Carter family connection. I had filed it. I had watched. I had waited to see what kind of person she was. Now 3 years into her marriage to my son, I knew. I closed the report. I sat for a moment in my office chair, the old leather one that Leonard had picked out in 1999, and that I had reupholstered twice rather than replace, and looked out the window at the Atlanta skyline. My phone showed one new message from Dot sent 4 minutes ago. Whitfield Realty floors 14 and 15 renewal inquiry just came in. Also flagged something else you should see. Not urgent, but worth a conversation. My office tomorrow. I typed back 7 a.m. Then I set the phone down. I looked at the skyline for another moment. All those lit windows, all those people still at their desks at 7 in the evening, all those lives I would never know the details of. Leonard would have known what I was thinking. He always did. People are going to look at us and see what they want to see. I picked up the small black notebook from beside the keyboard. opened it to the current page, added a date and 3 words. Then I closed it, turned off my desk lamp, and went home. The invitation had arrived by text about a month before the gala, not to me directly. Derek forwarded it with a message that had the particular quality of someone who has been told what to say and is doing their best to make it sound natural. Hey, Mom, Brianna's company is having their 10-year anniversary gala next month. Would mean a lot if you could come. Black tie, but don't worry about that. Just wear whatever's comfortable. I read it twice. The don't worry about that was Derek's addition, I was fairly sure. Brianna would not have included it. I texted back that I would be happy to come. I meant it, though perhaps not in the way he intended. The Caldwell Tower in Midtown Atlanta has 42 floors and a grand ballroom on the 3rd level with 20-foot ceilings and a wall of windows that looks out over Peachtree Street. On the evening of the Whitfield Realty 10th Anniversary Gala, those windows were lit from inside like a lantern, and from the street below, you could see the silhouettes of 200 people celebrating a decade of success. I know the building well. I have known it since 2008 when I signed the purchase agreement in Raymond's office on a Thursday afternoon, and then drove home and made chicken soup because it was a cold night and I felt like soup. I took a car service because parking downtown on a Friday is a particular kind of misery that I have earned the right to avoid. The driver held the door. I thanked him by name. I walked into the lobby in my black dress, the good one, the silk crepe that I have had since 2016, and that fits exactly right, and followed the sound of a string quartet up the escalator to the 3rd floor. Brianna met me at the entrance to the ballroom. She was in midnight blue, which suited her. Her hair was done. She looked objectively spectacular, and she knew it in the way that people know things they have worked very hard for. Mom? She air-kissed my cheek. You made it. The warmth in her voice was just sufficient, not effusive, not cold, calibrated. Derek's already inside. Let me find someone to show you to your seat. The someone was a young man with a clipboard who walked me through the main floor, past the round tables with the white linen and the flowers and the people in their evening clothes, already well into their first glasses of wine, and around the edge of the room to a smaller cluster of tables near the far wall close to the door that led to the catering kitchen. It was a perfectly fine table. There were 4 other people already seated there. A man from the company that maintained the HVAC system, a woman from the catering company who was checking something on her phone, and a couple who I eventually understood were the parents of one of Whitfield's younger agents. People who, like me, had been included as an obligation rather than a pleasure. Can I get you anything? The young man with the clipboard asked. Club soda, I said. Thank you. He brought it. I settled in. I found my small black notebook in my purse, set it on the table beside my glass, and looked out at the room. I want to describe what it feels like to sit in that kind of chair in that kind of corner, and understand something that no one around you understands. It is not triumphant. That is the first thing people get wrong when they imagine this kind of situation. They picture something cinematic, a kind of satisfied smirking in the shadows. It is not that. It is, if anything, a little lonely. You are watching people behave in ways they would not behave if they knew the truth, and you have chosen to let them. And the choosing is not easy even when it's right. You are holding something heavy and holding it quietly, and quiet heaviness is still heavy. I watched Brianna work the room. She was very good at it. I will give her that without qualification. She moved from group to group with the ease of someone who has spent years practicing and has gotten to the point where the practice no longer shows. She laughed at the right moments. She touched arms. She introduced Derek, my husband the architect, with a pride that was real, even if everything surrounding it was constructed. Derek caught my eye from across the room and smiled. I smiled back. He started to make his way towards me, but Brianna said something to him and redirected his attention to a couple nearby, and he went where she pointed the way he had always gone where she pointed, and I watched him go, and thought about what that had cost him over 5 years without his fully realizing it. The man next to me, the HVAC contractor whose name was Dale, asked what my connection to the company was. My daughter-in-law works here, I said. Oh, which one? Brianna Carter, née Whitfield. He raised his eyebrows. The top producer, she's your daughter-in-law. She is. He seemed to be recalibrating his understanding of why I was sitting at this table. I watched him do it. It was not an unkind process, just an honest one. She's something, he said finally, which covered a lot of ground. She really is, I agreed. Tyler Brooks took the stage at 8:15. I had seen his photograph in Dot's files, a broad-shouldered man in his mid-40s with the confidence of someone who has confused success with infallibility. In person, he was exactly what the photograph suggested, well-dressed, well-practiced, accustomed to rooms listening when he spoke. He talked about Whitfield Realty's decade of growth. The market share gained, the deals closed, the reputation built. He talked about the team, the finest in Atlanta, and I don't say that lightly, and there was a ripple of appreciative laughter. He named names, praised achievements, told 2 jokes that landed adequately. Then he said, "And as some of you know, we're looking ahead to the next chapter. We've been operating out of Caldwell Tower for 5 years now, and it's time to stop being tenants and start being owners." A swell of applause. Brianna at a table near the front was clapping with the rest of them, her face turned up toward the stage with an expression I recognized as the one she used when she wanted to project loyalty and shared vision. "We've been exploring the acquisition of our current floors," Tyler continued. 14 and 15. Great space, great location, and frankly, the ownership structure on this building is a bit diffuse. A family trust situation. You know how those go. Nobody quite knows who's minding the store. Another ripple of laughter from the crowd. I opened my notebook, wrote the date, the time, and 3 words. Then I closed it and set it on the table and picked up my club soda and looked at the stage where Tyler Brooks was still talking about a building he did not own. Noah found me at 9 o'clock. I heard him before I saw him. His voice cutting through the adult noise the way only a 6-year-old's can, that particular frequency that bypasses all the intervening sound and arrives directly in your chest. "Grandma." He came through the crowd like a small, determined boat through rough water, dodging around legs and handbags, and a passing waiter with a tray of champagne until he arrived at my table slightly out of breath and grabbed my hand with both of his. "I've been looking everywhere for you," he said, as if this were my fault and also completely forgivable. "Why are you all the way over here?" "Saving you a seat," I said. He accepted this explanation without question, the beautiful literalism of children, and climbed up into the chair beside me. He was wearing a miniature suit with a bow tie that was already listing to the left, and his hair had been neatly combed at some point earlier in the evening and had since gone its own way. "Tell me the story," he said. "The one about the queen who saved herself." "Here, right here." He settled himself more firmly into the chair, arranging his small body with the air of someone who had selected the finest seat available. "I've been waiting all night." I had told him this story perhaps 40 times. He never tired of it. Every time I told it, he listened with the same focused attention as if the ending might change. I opened my mouth to begin. "Noah." Brianna's voice came from behind me. I did not turn around immediately. I heard her heels on the floor, felt the change in the air pressure that happens when someone moves through a room with purpose. "Noah, come here, please." "But Mom, Grandma's going to tell me the story." "I know, baby." Her voice was smooth, controlled. "Grandma can tell you the story another time. Right now I need you to come say hello to the Hendersons." He looked at me. The look on his face, the conflict in it, the wanting to stay, and the understanding that he was being told to go was one of the most uncomplicated pieces of communication I have ever received from another human being. "Go ahead, sweetheart," I said quietly. "I'll tell you tomorrow." He slid off the chair, took one step toward his mother, then turned back and hugged me quickly around the neck, his small arms tight for just a moment. Then he went. Brianna stepped forward to take his hand, and as she turned to guide him back toward the main floor, she paused, looked at me. And in that pause, she made a decision. I could see it happen, the small calculation, the assessment of the room, how many people were within earshot, how much it would cost her to say what she was about to say versus what she believed it would cost her not to. Mom? Her voice was pleasant, audible. The two women at the nearest table looked up without meaning to. Are you doing all right over here? You look a little... She tilted her head, the picture of gentle concern out of place. The words were so carefully chosen. Not lost, not uncomfortable. Out of place, which managed to be both an observation and a verdict wrapped in the packaging of a question. I looked at her. I took my time with it. She held my gaze for exactly as long as was comfortable, and then, because she was good at this, broke away first the move of someone who controls the terms of every interaction who exits, before anything can be said that she cannot manage. Let me know if you need anything, she said, and turned and walked back into the room with Noah's hand in hers. I watched them go. I watched Noah look back at me over his shoulder once. His little free hand rose in a half wave. I raised mine in return. Then I looked down at the table, at the notebook, at my own hands, which were completely still. I reached for my phone, opened a new message to Dot. 3 words. Get it ready. Her response came in under a minute, the way it always did. Already done. I set the phone face down on the table, picked up my club soda, looked out at the room at the chandelier throwing light across 200 people who were celebrating at the stage where Tyler Brooks had already moved on to thanking the catering staff at the table near the front, where Brianna was now laughing at something someone had said, her hand on Derek's arm, every inch of her at home in this room she believed she had built. She had no idea. I finished my club soda, thanked Dale, the HVAC contractor, for the conversation, collected my purse and my notebook, and I walked out of my own building into the Atlanta night. I arrived at Carter Equity headquarters at 6:30 the next morning. The building was quiet at that hour, the lobby lit but empty, the elevator bank still the kind of hush that large buildings have before the day fills them up. Jimmy Patterson was at the security desk in his jacket and tie, the way he always was, a cup of coffee steaming beside his sign-in log. He had been running security at this building since the day we opened it. He knew my face the way he knew the exits and the camera angles and the weight of the fire doors, not as information to be recalled, but as something simply known. He looked up when I came through the lobby doors. Mrs. Carter. A pause. Early morning. I have some things to take care of, Jimmy. He nodded once the way he did when he understood that no further explanation was coming and none was needed. I signed in. I always signed in same as everyone else because rules you make selectively are not rules, and took the elevator to 42. Raymond Okafor was already there. I had texted him from the car. He was standing at the window when I came in, his jacket on, despite the hour, his coffee untouched on the corner of my desk. Raymond did not drink coffee until 9. He kept it present as a social prop and ignored it with complete consistency, which I had always found quietly admirable. Tell me what Dot flagged, I said. He turned from the window, reached not for the filing cabinet against the wall, but for the bottom drawer of my own desk, a drawer I had given him a key to 3 years ago for exactly this kind of situation. He set a folder on the desk. It was thick, maybe 1.5 inches, tabbed organized the way Raymond organized everything. On the label in his precise handwriting, Whitfield Realty B. Whitfield Carter, active monitoring. I looked at it for a moment. You knew I'd need this, I said. I prepared it 18 months ago, he said, when she made senior manager and started signing off on vendor contracts. That's when the pattern became documentable. He sat down across from me the way he did when something required his full attention, rather than his standing at a distance attention. I've been waiting for you to ask for it. Let me explain what that folder represented, because I want you to understand the full weight of what I'm about to tell you. When Brianna Whitfield walked into my son's life 5 years ago, she was already an agent at Whitfield Realty. A different Whitfield, no relation, one of those coincidences that Atlanta's real estate world produces occasionally. She had been a tenant in my building for 3 months before Derek brought her home to my kitchen. Dot had flagged the name overlap as a routine disclosure item, and I had noted it and continued noting it quietly for the next 7 years. What I had not expected, what even I, who expected most things, had not fully prepared for, was the specificity of what the folder contained. It was 47 pages. Documented instances with dates and witnesses where available of Brianna's conduct toward the support staff at Whitfield Realty over the 18 months since her promotion. The woman who cleaned the offices on the 14th floor told in front of 3 colleagues that her work was barely adequate for a halfway house. The building engineer who had been summoned at 7 in the morning to fix a thermostat issue in Brianna's office and was lectured for 11 minutes about his response time. A receptionist named Gloria, 58 years old, 20 years with the company, who had been passed over for a raise that Brianna had argued against in writing, citing Gloria's limited adaptability to evolving workplace demands. That phrase, limited adaptability to evolving workplace demands, written down, filed, used as justification. I sat with that folder for 2 hours before Raymond spoke again. "What do you want to do?" "I want to know everything that happens next," I said. "Before it happens, if possible." He nodded. That was all. 3 days later, on a Tuesday morning, I drove to Decatur and met Cecile Monroe at a coffee shop on the main square that she liked because the owner was a friend of hers, and the espresso was good, and the tables were far enough apart that you could have a real conversation without the next table hearing it. Cecile was already there, hands wrapped around a small dark coffee when I arrived. She had the look she got when she already knew something and was waiting to see if what I was about to say matched it. I sat down, ordered tea, set the folder on the table between us. She looked at it, looked at me, picked it up and opened it. I watched her read. Cecile Monroe has one of the best poker faces I have ever encountered across a negotiating table, which is saying something, because I have encountered some exceptional ones. But I watched the pages turn, and I watched something shift behind her eyes slowly, the way ice shifts in a glass when the temperature changes. She closed the folder after 20 minutes. "She did all of this," Cecile said. It was not a question. "And no one has told Derek." Cecile was quiet for a moment. "Hannah," she set her coffee down. "Are you sure about what you're doing?" "This is your son's wife." "I know whose wife she is." "Then you know that whatever you set in motion here doesn't just affect her." "I know that too." I folded my hands around my teacup. "That's why I waited. I needed to be certain that what I was seeing was real and not something I was constructing because it was convenient for me to construct it." I looked at her directly. "I have been watching for 7 years, Cecile. I did not go looking for this. It came to me page by page." She held my gaze for a long moment. Then she nodded once the way she nodded when a decision had been made, and she was moving from the question of whether to the question of how. "So what happens now?" "Now we wait for Brianna to finish what she started," I said. "And then we have a meeting." The call from Dot came on a Thursday afternoon 7 days after the gala. I was in the garden, which is where I go when I need to think without thinking the kind of thinking that happens through the hands, through the repetitive work of pulling weeds and checking the fig tree, and deciding which tomato plants need staking. Leonard used to say I did my best strategic planning in the garden, and he was probably right, though I would never have admitted it at the time. My phone buzzed on the porch railing. Dot's message was 4 lines. "Purchase inquiry just filed through Raymond's office. Shell Company BW Property Solutions, LLC. Floors 14 and 15 Caldwell Tower. Offered price $4.2 million. Current market value $7.1 million. They think we don't know what it's worth." I read it twice. Set the phone down. Pulled a weed that didn't need pulling. BW Property Solutions. The initials arranged themselves without effort. Brianna Whitfield. She had used her maiden name. She had filed under a company that did not on its surface connect to anyone named Carter. She had made an offer at 40% below market value, which meant she believed she was dealing with someone who either didn't know the building's worth or didn't have anyone sharp enough to tell them. She had done all of this without telling Derek. I was certain of that. If Derek had known, he would have said something to me or to her or to someone. He was not built for that kind of quiet. I picked up my phone, typed back to Dot. "Schedule the meeting. 1 week. All parties. Tell Raymond to send Derek the architecture consultation email." Then I set the phone down again and went back to the garden. The fig tree needed attention. The figs were just beginning to turn that deep greenish purple that meant another 2 weeks before they were ready. Leonard had planted it the summer Derek turned 4, and every year since, through everything through the building of the company and the loss of Leonard and the long strange years in between, it had given fruit. That seemed at this particular moment like the right thing to think about. Meanwhile, in a glass-walled office on the 14th floor of the building, I owned Brianna Carter was having the best week of her professional life. She told Tyler Brooks about the offer on a Friday morning, framing it as a side investment she'd been developing independently. Tyler had leaned back in his chair with the expression he used when he was deciding whether to be impressed or territorial, and had landed on impressed. BW Property Solutions, he said. That's yours. Just filed, she said. If this goes through, we'd own the building outright. No more lease negotiations, no more renewal uncertainty. What's the ask? She told him. He let out a low whistle. They agreed to that price. They haven't responded yet, but the ownership structure as a family trust looks like it's been on autopilot for years. I don't think they have anyone actively managing it. She smiled. Sometimes the easiest deals are the ones where the other side doesn't know what they have. That evening, she told Derek she was working on a big project that could change everything for them. He asked what kind of project. She told him to trust her, that she had it handled, that this was her area, and she knew what she was doing. He said okay. He always said okay. What she did not tell him was the company name. What she did not tell him was the address of the building. What she did not tell him was that the address of record for BW Property Solutions, LLC, filed with the Georgia Secretary of State 3 weeks before the Gala was their home address on Sycamore Lane, because she had used the address where she received her personal mail the way people do when they are moving quickly and not thinking about which details will matter later. On the 5th day after the Gala, my phone rang at 10 in the morning. Brianna's name on the screen, which was unusual. She texted. She did not call. I answered on the second ring. Mom. The warmth in her voice was turned up 2 notches above its usual setting. I noted this the way I noted most things quietly accurately, without letting the notation show. I hope I'm not interrupting anything. Not at all. How are you, Brianna? Busy, honestly. Really busy. A small, pleased laugh. Good busy, though. Things are moving. A pause that was slightly too constructed. Actually, I was wondering, do you have any time this week to watch Noah? Just for a day, maybe Wednesday? I have some meetings I can't reschedule, and Derek has a site visit in Savannah. Of course, I said. Wednesday is fine. You're a lifesaver. The relief in her voice was real, which made it the most genuine thing she had said in the conversation. I'll drop him at yours at 8. 8 is fine. Amazing, thank you, Mom, really. She ended the call. I held the phone for a moment after the line went quiet. In the 5 years since Brianna had become part of this family, she had asked me to watch Noah 4 times. The first time Derek's car had broken down, and they'd had no other option. The second, her regular sitter had canceled last minute. The third, they'd been double booked for events and needed to divide and conquer. This was the 4th time, and it was the first time she had called instead of texting, the first time she had said, "You're a lifesaver," and the first time she had needed me on a day when I happened to know, because Raymond had told me that her lawyers were finalizing the BW Property Solutions purchase offer. She needed a Wednesday. I was the most convenient Wednesday available. I understood. I did not mind. Noah was always worth it for any reason. He arrived at 8 with a backpack full of small cars and a very serious question about whether I had any of the good crackers, meaning the ones shaped like fish which I kept in the pantry specifically because he liked them. I confirmed the crackers. He approved. We settled in. We built a parking garage out of wooden blocks. We read 2 books. We ate lunch at the kitchen table, the same table where Leonard had spread the map in 1987, where I had signed the loan papers with shaking hands, and Noah narrated in considerable detail the complex social dynamics of his kindergarten class, which apparently involved a disputed territory of Lego bricks and at least one formal grievance. I listened to all of it. I asked the right questions. This was not difficult. He was 6 and he was Leonard's grandson, and I would have listened to him describe a parking lot for 4 hours if that was what he wanted to talk about. It was mid-afternoon, the quiet part of the day when the light goes golden and slightly sideways, when he climbed into my lap in the armchair by the window and said with the abruptness that children have when they've been turning something over for a while, "Grandma, how come you don't come to our house very much anymore?" I was quiet for a moment. "Who told you I don't come very much?" He thought about it. "Mom said you always seem out of place there." He said it carefully, the way children repeat phrases they've absorbed without fully understanding. "She said it's probably better for you to stay at your own house." I looked at the top of his head, at his hair, which was Leonard's, the same texture, the same stubborn direction it grew in. Out of place. The same words. Used twice now. Once to my face in a room full of people, and once to a 6-year-old who had carried them home and repeated them without knowing their weight. "Grandma," Noah said, looking up at me, "are you out of place?" I held him a little closer. "Baby, I have never been out of place anywhere in my life." He considered this with great seriousness. "I didn't think so," he said finally. "You seem like someone who knows where they are." I kissed the top of his head. In my free hand, resting on the arm of the chair where I'd set it when he'd climbed up, was Dot's latest summary sheet. 1 page. At the top, in her neat font, BW Property Solutions, LLC final offer submitted, awaiting response from ownership. Below that, the registered address of BW Property Solutions. Their home address, Derek's and Brianna's house on Sycamore Lane. Noah had fallen slightly sideways into my shoulder, heavy with the particular drowsiness of a child who has been busy since 8 in the morning. His breathing slowed. I folded the paper, put it in my pocket, looked out the window at the afternoon light on Elmwood Drive, thought about Leonard, thought about the fig tree, thought about a meeting I had scheduled for Friday of the following week in a room on the 42nd floor of a building that bore my name in the county property records, where a woman who thought I didn't know what I owned was going to sit across a table from me for the first time in 5 years and finally see me clearly. I would be ready. I had been ready for a long time. Friday morning, 10 o'clock. I had been in the building since 7, not in the conference room. I let Dot handle the setup, the water glasses, and the printed agendas, and the particular arrangement of chairs that signals who holds the room before anyone has said a word. I was in my office at my desk in the quiet that I have come to associate with decisions that have already been made and are simply waiting to be delivered. I put on the suit at 8:30. Navy blue single-breasted, bought in 2015 from a tailor in Buckhead who had made 2 other suits for me over the years, and who understood that I was not interested in fashion, only in fit. I had worn it 4 times. Once to a board meeting in Charlotte, where we closed the largest acquisition in Carter Equity's history. Once to Leonard's memorial service, because he had always liked that color on me. Once to a meeting with a bank that had initially declined to refinance our Savannah portfolio, and that had by the end of that meeting reconsidered. And now this. Leonard's ring on my left hand. No other jewelry. I looked at myself in the small mirror behind my office door, the one I'd hung there in 2002 because the light in that corner was good, and I thought this is what 64 years looks like when it has been used well. Silver hair, straight spine, eyes that have seen enough to stop being surprised by most things. I was ready at 9:55. Jimmy brought me up at 9:58. Not because I needed an escort. I know every floor of this building the way I know my own hands. But Jimmy had been here since the first day, and on mornings that mattered, he had always walked me to wherever I needed to be. It was not ceremony. It was just what we did. The elevator opened onto the 42nd floor corridor. Through the glass wall of the conference room, I could see them already seated. Tyler Brooks at the far end of the long table with his lawyer to his left, papers arranged in front of him, with the neatness of someone who uses organization as a show of competence. Brianna beside him in a charcoal blazer, her hair up, a notepad and a pen placed at precise angles. Every inch of her prepared for a negotiation she believed she had already won. Cecile Monroe sat on the near side of the table to the left of the chair at the head. She had her reading glasses on and was reviewing something in a folder, and she did not look up when Brianna glanced her way. Brianna did not recognize her. At the far end of the room near the window that looked out over Midtown, Derek sat in the last chair on the right side of the table, slightly removed from the main arrangement. He was in his work clothes, a dark jacket, open collar, the look of a man who had come from somewhere and was not sure yet where he had arrived. He saw Brianna when he came in, and she saw him, and for a moment neither of them spoke. I had been told by Dot that he'd asked the receptionist twice what this meeting was about, and the receptionist had said both times that she wasn't at liberty to say. He was still sitting with that question when I walked through the door. I have thought about this moment many times over the years, not this specific moment, but the category of it. The moment when the thing you have built becomes visible to people who believed it didn't exist. I wondered in the abstract what it would feel like. It felt very quiet. I walked in. Jimmy held the door and then stepped to one side. Raymond came in behind me a step back, and to the right, the 47-page folder under his left arm, and 3 copies of the formal ownership documentation under his right. Brianna was the first one to see me. I watched it happen across her face in the space of about 2 seconds, the initial registering of a familiar figure, the confusion of context, the beginning of a question, and then like a circuit completing the understanding of what the context actually was. She stood up. I don't think she meant to. It was reflex. Mom. The word came out wrong, too thin, too uncertain, nothing like the calibrated warmth she could produce on command. Why are you here? She looked around the room. At Raymond. At Cecile, who had lowered her reading glasses and was watching with the particular composure of someone who has been waiting patiently for something to arrive. This is a business meeting. You can't be here. This isn't right. I set the folder on the table. Not hard. Not dramatically. I simply placed it where it needed to be, the way you set something down when you're done carrying it. Then I sat down at the head of the table. Tyler Brooks had been occupying that chair when I came in. He was no longer in it. I'm not sure he was aware of having moved. Raymond stepped forward. When Raymond Okafor speaks in a professional context, he uses a particular register not louder than necessary, not performative, but with a precision that makes every word feel load-bearing. Hannah Josephine Carter, he said, founder and chairman of the board of Carter Equity Group. We are the ownership entity for Caldwell Tower floors 1 through 42, including the 14th and 15th floors currently leased to Whitfield Realty, and the subject of the purchase inquiry filed 3 weeks ago by BW Property Solutions, LLC. The room was very still. Tyler Brooks had the expression of a man rapidly performing calculations. His lawyer had stopped writing. Brianna was still standing. I looked at her. I took my time with it not to unsettle her, though I understood that it would, but because I had waited a long time for this, and I was going to be present for it. She was even now composed in the way that some people are composed under pressure. Not calm exactly, but controlled, the mechanism still running even when the ground has shifted. I could see her looking for the angle, the reframe, the way to take hold of this moment before it got further away from her. I opened the folder. Brianna, I said, you submitted an offer to purchase this building. I kept my voice level because level was what this moment required. I've read the offer. I have some questions. She didn't answer. For the first time in 5 years of knowing her, Brianna Carter had nothing to say. Raymond placed the first document on the table. BW Property Solutions, LLC, he said, sliding a copy toward the center of the table where everyone could see it. Filed with the Georgia Secretary of State 11 weeks ago. Sole member and registered agent, Brianna Whitfield. He slid a second document. Articles of Organization. Signature page. He let that sit for a moment the way a good lawyer lets evidence sit, not explaining it, simply presenting it, giving the room time to read. Then the third document. Registered address of BW Property Solutions, LLC. It was a single line. An address on Sycamore Lane, Derek's address. The house where he and Brianna had lived for 4 years. The address where their mail came, where Noah slept, where Derek came home every evening to a wife who had been running a separate company in his name without telling him. The silence in the room changed. It had been a professional silence before tense focused the silence of a negotiation with high stakes. Now it was something else. I watched Derek look at that line on the page, and I watched his face do something I had not seen it do since he was a boy. It went very still, the way faces go still when a person is trying to catch up to something that has already happened. He did not look at Brianna. He looked at the paper. Tyler Brooks pushed his chair back and stood up. His face had gone from pale to a particular shade of red that I recognized as the color of institutional embarrassment, the look of a man realizing that someone on his team has involved him in something he would never have sanctioned. Brianna. His voice was flat. You used your company affiliation in a personal LLC registered to a shared residential address to file a below-market acquisition on a building we lease. He didn't wait for her answer. He turned to me. Mrs. Carter, I want to be clear that Whitfield Realty had no authorized involvement in this transaction. He straightened his jacket. We'll be in touch through counsel about the lease renewal, on standard terms. A pause. I apologize for the unprofessionalism. He left. His lawyer followed. The 4 Carter Equity board members who had been sitting quietly along the near wall gathered their things and excused themselves. Dot caught my eye as she passed and gave me the smallest nod, the nod that meant everything was in order and she would be just outside the door. Cecile stood last. She put one hand on my shoulder as she passed briefly warmly the touch of someone who has been your friend through the years that matter. She said nothing. She didn't need to. The door closed. In the conference room on the 42nd floor of the building I had owned for 17 years, there were 3 people left. Me at the head of the table, Derek at the far end still looking at the address on the paper in front of him, and Brianna still standing, her hand resting on the back of her chair, the architecture of her composure showing its first real cracks. She looked at me, and I saw something shift in her face. Not remorse, not quite, but the specific look of someone who has built an entire structure on the assumption that a particular wall would hold and has just understood that it will not. You knew, she said. Not a question. I've known what you were capable of since before you married my son, I said. I wanted to believe I was wrong. I gave you 5 years to show me I was wrong. She had nothing to say to that either. I stood up, closed the folder, set it aside. Derek, I said. He finally looked up. Take whatever time you need. I'll be outside. I walked to the door, opened it, and I left them alone with the truth of what had happened in that room, which was the only thing I had ever had the right to give them. I stood in the corridor outside the conference room for 15 minutes, not pacing, just standing the way I have learned to stand when something large is happening on the other side of a wall. And the most useful thing I can do is stay out of the way of it. Jimmy was down the hall at the elevator bank, close enough to be present, far enough to give me room. He didn't ask anything. He never did at the moments when asking would have been the wrong thing. The door opened at 12 minutes. Brianna came out first. She had put herself back together in the way that she always put herself back together, not completely, not the way she'd looked when she walked in, but enough. Enough to walk with her shoulders level and her chin at the angle she'd chosen for herself 20 years ago, and never adjusted. She was carrying her notepad and her pen, which she'd picked up from the table before she left. A reflex. She was someone who always knew where her things were. She walked past me without stopping. Not a dramatic exit. Not a scene. She simply walked, and the elevator opened when she pressed the button, and she stepped in, and the doors closed, and she was gone. I thought about the woman I had seen on a Wednesday afternoon 4 years ago, sitting on the floor of her own living room with her little boy in her lap, squinting at a puzzle piece in that exaggerated theatrical way that was just for him. The woman who had kissed the top of his head without thinking about it. That woman was real. She was in there somewhere underneath everything else. Whatever happened next, Noah would still have a mother who loved him. That mattered. I held on to it. The door opened again at 15 minutes. Derek stood in the doorway. He looked like a man who had been taken apart and was working out piece by piece how to put himself back together. His jacket was off. He'd been running his hands through his hair. "Mom," he said, "can you come back in?" We sat across from each other at the long table, him in the chair he'd been in before me, in the one beside it, rather than the head of the table, because this was not a meeting anymore. This was just the two of us. He was quiet for a long time. I let him be. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, Atlanta went about its Friday morning. Traffic on Peachtree. A construction crane turning slowly against the sky. The particular quality of light that this city has in the fall gold and slightly hazy that I have been looking at my whole adult life and have never gotten tired of. "How long have you known," he finally said, "about who she really is?" "I've been watching for a long time," I said. "The building I knew about from the beginning that was just information. The rest of it took longer to be certain about. I needed to know I wasn't seeing what I wanted to see." "Why didn't you tell me?" I looked at him. At the face I had known since before it was fully formed, since it was a newborn face that hadn't yet decided what it was going to be. He was 38 years old, and he had his father's jaw and his father's hands, and a heart that was at its core exactly as good as Leonard's had been, which was both his greatest quality and the thing that had made him vulnerable to someone who knew how to use it. "Because you weren't ready," I said. "And because it wasn't mine to take from you. You could have stopped this years ago. I could have told you what I thought years ago. That's different from stopping it." I folded my hands on the table. "Derek, you're a grown man. I could show you the truth. I couldn't make you see it. Those are two different things, and only one of them was ever my job." He absorbed that. Looked down at the table at the registration document for BW Property Solutions that was still lying there, the one with his home address on it, the address where he picked up his mail and slept and made coffee in the morning, and believed until this morning that he understood the terms of his own life. "She didn't tell me," he said. Not accusatory, just the fact of it still settling. "No, she was going to buy your building." He said it slowly, like someone reading a sentence in a language they're still learning. "With your name on the deed, without telling me." "Yes." He was quiet again. Then the file, the 47 pages Raymond had. "I'll give you all of it," I said. "Everything I know, everything that's documented. Not so I can make your decision for you because it's yours to make, but you deserve to have the whole picture." He nodded. Didn't speak. I stood up, moved to the chair directly beside him, rather than across the way I used to sit next to him at the kitchen table when he was small, and something had gone wrong at school, and he needed to talk, but wasn't sure yet how to start. "Derek," he looked up, "do you remember what your father said the night we signed the loan for the first piece of land you were 3? You wouldn't remember." He shook his head. "He said people are going to look at us and see what they want to see. But we know what we're building. That's the only thing that matters." He was very still. "You don't need me to save you," I said. "You need the truth so you can stand up on your own. Those are two completely different things. Your father understood that. He understood it about me every single day we were together." I put my hand over his on the table, my hand that had signed the papers and kept the books and held this family together through the years when holding it together was the hardest thing I had ever done. "You're his son. You know how to stand up. You just forgot for a while." He looked at me for a long time. Then he put his other hand over mine, and we sat like that for a moment, 3 generations of Carters, in a room that had my name on the deed, in a city that had watched us build something from nothing, in the particular quiet that comes after the truth has finally been said out loud. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now you decide," I said. "And whatever you decide, I'm here." 3 days later, I met Raymond for coffee and gave him the instructions. Whitfield Realty's lease on floors 14 and 15 would renew at standard market rate. No penalties, no concessions, no preferential treatment in either direction. Carter Equity would have no involvement in whatever Whitfield chose to do about Brianna internally. That was their matter, not mine. The 47-page file went to Derek that afternoon, hand-delivered by Dot in a plain manila envelope. No cover letter, no instructions. Just the facts organized the way Raymond organized everything clearly, completely, without editorializing. And the third thing, the only condition I had stated out loud to anyone I delivered in a phone call to Brianna that evening. She answered on the fourth ring, said nothing when she heard my voice. "I'm not calling to argue," I said. "I'm calling to tell you one thing and then I'm going to hang up, and this is the last time we'll need to have this conversation." A silence. "Noah," I said, "whatever happens between you and Derek, whatever you two decide, however this goes, I will see my grandson every week. Not because you allow it, because he is my family and I am his, and that is not something that gets negotiated." I paused. "I'm not asking you to like me. I'm not asking you to understand me. I'm telling you how things are." Another silence. Longer. Then very quietly, "Okay." That was all. I hung up. I picked Noah up from school that Friday afternoon, the way I had picked him up most Fridays for the past 6 years, since he was small enough to fall asleep in the car on the way home. He came through the school doors at 3:15 with his backpack listing to one side and a drawing in his hand, something in crayon that appeared to involve either a very large dog or a horse. He would tell me which when he was ready. He saw me at the curb and ran the last 20 feet the run of a child who is genuinely glad to see you and has not yet learned to make that gladness smaller. He grabbed my hand, looked up at me with Leonard's eyes. "Grandma," he said with the gravity of someone delivering important news, "I made you something." He held up the drawing. It was, he explained, a picture of a queen. She had a crown, though he had drawn it at a slight angle so it looked more like a hat. She was standing in front of something tall, a building possibly, or a mountain, he wasn't entirely sure. And she was smiling. "That's you," he said. I looked at the drawing for a moment, at the crooked crown and the tall building and the smiling figure with silver hair that he had colored in, carefully gone back over twice to make sure it was right. "She doesn't look out of place," I said. He shook his head firmly. "She's right where she's supposed to be." We walked to the park at the end of the block, the one with the big oak tree that drops acorns in October, and we sat on the bench underneath it, and I told him the story about the queen who saved herself, the one who didn't need a crown to know what she was, the one who built everything quietly while the world looked somewhere else. He listened the way he always listened, like the ending might be different this time and he didn't want to miss it. The afternoon light came through the oak leaves in long gold pieces. I thought about Leonard, about the kitchen table and the map and the shaking hands and the 31 years that followed, about what it means to build something, really build it with your hands and your time and your absolute conviction that the ground will hold, about what it means to know what you're building even when no one else can see it yet. The next morning I made coffee in my kitchen on Elmwood Drive in the house I have lived in for 30 years and will live in until I don't. My phone buzzed. "Raymond." Tyler Brooks called again. "Wants to discuss long-term partnership. 3rd time this week. How do you want me to handle it?" I looked at the message, picked up the mug, walked to the front porch. The street was just beginning. A neighbor walking a dog. A delivery truck making its first stop. A woman in scrubs coming off a night shift, moving with the particular tiredness of someone who has been useful all night and is finally going home. I typed back 2 words, "my calendar," set the phone face down on the porch railing, drank my coffee. Nobody walking by looked twice at the woman on the porch. An older black woman in a housecoat, silver hair, bare feet on the worn boards of a porch that needed repainting. Nothing to see, nothing remarkable. They saw what they wanted to see. I had spent 64 years understanding that, and somewhere along the way I had made my peace with it, not because it was fair, but because it had given me something they never counted on giving me. Time, clarity, the long, patient, uninterrupted work of building something real. I looked out at the street I had walked for 30 years, at the fig tree in the backyard, just visible over the roof line, at the sky over Atlanta, going from gray to gold the way it did every morning, reliable as anything I had ever known. They spent years looking past me. I used that time well.